I've been married to Emily for 10 years. We met when we were both in college, young, broke, and utterly infatuated. She had this way of making me feel like I was the center of her universe, and for the longest time, I believed it. We built a life together, the kind of life you see in those overly sentimental commercials. A cozy house in the suburbs, 2 kids who are the absolute light of my life, and a dog named Max who acts like he owns the place. But recently, something changed. It was subtle at first, like a song you've heard 1,000 times but suddenly realized there's a note missing. Emily's smile seemed forced, her laughter hollow. She started working late more often, which wasn't unusual given her demanding job, but this felt different. I couldn't put my finger on it, and that gnawing feeling of dread began to take root. The house, once filled with warmth, now echoed with a silence I couldn't ignore. Even Max noticed it, often lying by the door, as if waiting for something, or someone, that wasn't coming home. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. After all, 10 years of marriage can make anyone feel like they're stuck in a rut. Maybe this was just a rough patch, a temporary glitch in our otherwise perfect life. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The cracks in our foundation were widening, and I could feel us slipping through them. Yet even with that unease creeping in, nothing could have prepared me for what was coming. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those rare days where we didn't have any plans. Emily had suggested we do our own thing for a while, something she'd never really done before. She used to insist on us spending every free moment together, whether it was watching movies on the couch or just taking a lazy walk around the neighborhood. So when she said she had errands to run and left without even giving me a second glance, I felt that whisper of doubt grow louder. Max must have sensed my unease because he followed me around the house, his eyes full of concern. I tried to distract myself by cleaning up, but as I walked past our bedroom, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. Her favorite necklace, an expensive piece I had gifted her on our 5th anniversary, was lying on the dresser. Emily never went anywhere without it. She always said it was her good luck charm, a reminder of us. That whisper of doubt turned into a roar. I grabbed my phone almost without thinking and opened our phone bill, something I never bothered to check. As I scrolled through the call logs, my hands started to shake. There was a number I didn't recognize, one that appeared over and over again, sometimes late at night, other times in the middle of the day when she was supposed to be at work. My mind started racing, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was just a friend she hadn't mentioned. Maybe I was reading too much into this. But then I noticed that the texts she sent to this number were deleted from her phone, and suddenly, everything clicked into place. I felt a sickening wave of nausea wash over me. Max whimpered softly, sensing my distress, and nudged my hand with his nose. I dropped to the floor beside him, the phone slipping from my grasp. The doubt had transformed into a cold, hard certainty. Emily was hiding something that could shatter the life we had built together. By Monday, I was a mess. Sleep had been elusive, my mind churning over every possible scenario. I started replaying every moment from the past few months, trying to pinpoint when things had shifted. There were too many signs that I had ignored, brushed off as stress from work, changes in mood, or just the ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. Emily came home that evening later than usual, her makeup slightly smudged and hair a bit disheveled. She barely acknowledged me, muttering something about a long day before heading upstairs to take a shower. As I heard the water running, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the reflection in the mirror across from me. A man I barely recognized stared back, eyes hollow, face pale, and the weight of suspicion pressing down on him like a lead blanket. I waited until she was out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, her face flushed from the steam. "Emily," I started, my voice more fragile than I'd intended. "Who is he?" For a split second, her expression faltered. It was quick, so quick that if I hadn't been watching her so closely, I would have missed it. But then she laughed, actually laughed, as if I had just told the world's most ridiculous joke. "What the hell are you talking about, Jake?" she said, brushing past me to grab some clothes from the closet. The air between us was thick with tension, every second feeling like an hour. I couldn't tear my eyes away from her, searching for any hint of guilt, any sign that I wasn't losing my mind. I'm talking about the calls, Emily, the late nights, the distance. I'm not stupid. Something's going on and I deserve to know the truth. She paused, her back to me as she pulled a shirt over her head. I could see her shoulders tense, the slightest quiver in her hands. But when she turned around, her face was set in a cold, hard mask. "You're being paranoid," she snapped. "It's just work. I'm under a lot of pressure, and you're not exactly making it easier with all your questions." There it was, the gaslighting, the classic twist of the knife that made me question my sanity. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was overreacting, but something in her eyes, something dark and evasive, told me I wasn't wrong. Before I could respond, she brushed past me again, heading for the door. "I'm going out for a drink," she said over her shoulder. "Maybe you should calm down before you start throwing around accusations." And just like that, she was gone, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence of our bedroom. Max curled up at my feet, his presence a small comfort in the storm that was now raging inside me. I knew I had to dig deeper, find the truth she was so desperately trying to hide, because deep down I knew this was only the beginning. The next day, I couldn't shake the image of Emily's cold, dismissive gaze. It was like she had become a stranger overnight, and it terrified me. I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus on anything else but the gnawing need to uncover what she was hiding. I decided to follow her. It felt wrong, like a betrayal of the trust we'd built over a decade, but I couldn't see any other way. She'd already left for work, so I waited. Hours ticked by, my nerves fraying with each passing minute. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, I was a bundle of anxiety, pacing the living room, barely able to sit still. Finally, Emily came home, but she didn't stay long. She changed into something casual, jeans, a loose sweater, and left without a word, not even glancing in my direction. My heart pounded as I grabbed my keys and followed her, staying far enough behind that she wouldn't notice. She drove into the city, weaving through the evening traffic with practiced ease. I kept my distance, every turn tightening the knot of dread in my stomach. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that this was all just a big misunderstanding. But then she pulled into the parking lot of a small, dimly lit bar, one I didn't recognize. I parked a few spaces away, watching as she got out of the car and walked inside. My hands were trembling, the adrenaline surging through me. I waited for what felt like an eternity, watching the entrance like a hawk. The longer I sat there, the more I started to doubt myself again. Maybe she was just meeting a friend. Maybe this had nothing to do with... Then I saw him. He stepped out of the shadows, a tall, well-built guy with an easy, arrogant confidence. Emily greeted him with a smile that I hadn't seen in months, a smile full of warmth and familiarity. My blood ran cold as they embraced, her arms sliding around his neck, their bodies pressing together in a way that left no room for doubt. It felt like the ground had opened up beneath me, like everything I thought I knew was collapsing in on itself. I wanted to storm in there, to demand answers, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by the sight of my wife in the arms of another man, a man who looked at her with the kind of intensity that used to be mine. They stayed like that for a moment, and then she took his hand and led him inside the bar, the door closing behind them with a finality that echoed through my bones. I sat there staring at the closed door, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like a physical force. Everything made sense now, the late nights, the secretive behavior, the coldness in her eyes. Emily was cheating on me. And it wasn't just a fling, it was something more, something deeper. I felt sick to my stomach, the world spinning around me as I tried to process what I had just witnessed. I couldn't stay there, couldn't keep watching them, so I drove home in a daze, my mind racing, trying to figure out what to do next. The truth was out, and there was no going back. When Emily finally came home that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in front of me. My hands were steady now, the shock having settled into a cold, simmering rage. Max was lying by my feet, his presence a comforting reminder that not everything in my life was falling apart. She walked in, glancing at me with barely concealed irritation, as if I were an inconvenience she had to deal with. "You're still up?" she asked, her voice casual, almost bored. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared at her, taking in every detail. The way her hair was slightly tousled, her lips a bit swollen, the faint scent of cologne that wasn't mine clinging to her clothes. It was like she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore, as if she believed I'd simply ignore the truth staring me in the face. "Where were you?" I finally asked, my voice low, controlled. She rolled her eyes, tossing her purse onto the counter. "Out! I told you I needed some time to myself." "To yourself?" I repeated, my grip tightening around the glass. "Is that what you call it now?" She froze, her eyes narrowing as she turned to face me fully. There was a flash of something in her expression. Panic, guilt, maybe even anger, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "What exactly are you implying, Jake?" I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor with a sharp, jarring sound. "I followed you, Emily. I saw you with him." The silence that followed was deafening. Her face went pale, and for a moment I thought she might try to deny it. But then, to my shock, she laughed, a bitter, humorless sound that echoed through the room. "You really couldn't just let it go, could you?" she said, shaking her head. "You had to play detective, had to know every little detail." "Are you serious right now?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, and you're blaming me for finding out?" "Lying?" she scoffed, her tone dripping with contempt. "What did you expect, Jake? You think I'm supposed to sit here night after night pretending everything's fine while you barely even notice I exist? What the hell are you talking about?" I was genuinely confused, trying to piece together her twisted logic. "I've always been here for you, Emily. I've done everything I could to make you happy." She sneered, crossing her arms. "Everything you could. But it was never about what I needed, was it? You were so focused on your career, your own little world, that you didn't see me slipping away." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was like she had twisted the knife, turning her betrayal into something that was somehow my fault. But I couldn't let her rewrite the narrative like that. "Don't try to justify this," I said, my voice trembling with barely controlled anger. "This isn't about me, Emily. This is about you making the choice to cheat, to betray our marriage. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me." She didn't respond right away, just stared at me with those cold, calculating eyes, the ones that had once been so full of love and warmth. And then, with a smirk that made my blood boil, she said the words that would haunt me forever. "Maybe if you were more of a man, I wouldn't have had to go looking for one." The room spun, my vision going red as the full weight of her cruelty crashed down on me. She stood there, arms crossed, like she'd won some twisted game, like she enjoyed watching me break. In that moment, I realized just how far gone she was, how much she had changed, or maybe how much I had failed to see who she really was all along. Her words echoed in my mind like a taunt, each one sharpening the pain in my chest. I was too stunned to react, too numb to feel anything but the burning sensation of betrayal. Emily stood there, staring at me with a smug satisfaction that turned my stomach. I wanted to scream, to yell, to break something, anything to release the fury boiling inside me. But instead, I found myself stepping back, unable to even look at her. It was like the woman I had married, the woman I had loved, was gone, replaced by someone cruel and unrecognizable. "I don't even know who you are anymore," I finally managed, my voice a broken whisper. She laughed again, that same bitter sound that had come to define her. "Maybe that's the problem, Jake. Maybe you never knew who I was. You just saw what you wanted to see." The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing in as I tried to make sense of everything. Was she right? Had I been blind to who she really was all this time? Or was this just another manipulation, another way to twist the knife deeper? "I gave you everything," I said, my voice shaking. "I gave you my love, my trust, my whole life. And this is how you repay me, by tearing it all apart?" She shrugged, as if it didn't matter, as if my pain was nothing more than an inconvenience to her. "Things change, Jake. People change. Maybe it's time you accepted that." I couldn't breathe. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal. It was all too much. I could feel myself teetering on the edge of something dark, something dangerous. I wanted to hurt her the way she had hurt me, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had inflicted on me. But I knew that wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't bring back the life we had lost. so I did the only thing I could think of. I walked out. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, needing to get away from her, from the poison she had injected into our lives. Max followed me, his loyal eyes filled with concern, but I couldn't even bring myself to acknowledge him. "Where do you think you're going?" she called after me, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Anywhere but here," I muttered, slamming the door behind me. I drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring past as I tried to clear my head. But no matter how far I went, the image of Emily with that man, the sound of her cruel words kept playing over and over in my mind. Eventually, I found myself parked on a quiet street, the car's engine humming softly as I sat there, staring blankly ahead. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in, the weight of it crushing me. My marriage was over, shattered by the one person I had trusted more than anyone in the world. I couldn't go back. I knew that much. There was no repairing what was broken, no mending the wounds she had inflicted. But what did that mean for me? For our kids? For the life we had built together? As I sat there, the darkness of the night surrounding me, I realized that I was at a crossroads. I could let this destroy me, let it consume me with anger and resentment. Or I could find a way to survive, to pick up the pieces and move forward, even if I had to do it alone. But for now, all I could do was sit in the car, the silence pressing in, and wonder how the hell my life had spiraled so far out of control. When I finally returned home, the house was dark and quiet, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I wasn't sure if Emily had gone to bed or if she was even still here. A part of me hoped she wasn't, that she'd packed up and left, sparing me the agony of facing her again. But as I stepped inside, Max met me at the door, his tail wagging slowly, a small comfort in the suffo. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear any more of her venomous words, but something inside me drove me upstairs. I needed to know where we stood, what, if anything, was left to salvage. My heart pounded as I approached the bedroom, the door slightly ajar. I hesitated, taking a deep, she was there, lying on the bed, but the sight hit me like a freight train, knocking the breath out of my lungs. Emily was in our bed, with him, the man from the bar. They were tangled together, sheets barely covering their naked bodies, his arm draped possessively over her as if he had any right. I felt like I was drowning, the room spinning as the full weight of her betrayal crushed down on me. This wasn't just an affair, some fleeting mistake. This was a deliberate, calculated act of cruelty. She had brought him into our home, into the space we had shared for years, and defiled it. My hands clenched into fists, every muscle in my body screaming at me to do something, to lash out, to make them pay for what they'd done. But I was frozen, unable to move, unable to even think beyond the blinding rage that consumed me. She must have sensed my presence because she stirred, blinking her eyes open. When she saw me standing there, her expression shifted, not to guilt or remorse, but to annoyance, like I was the one intruding. "What the hell are you doing here?" she snapped, pulling the sheet tighter around herself as if that could shield her from the truth. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My voice was gone, buried under the weight of everything I had just witnessed. The man beside her, this stranger who had somehow taken everything from me, sat up, smirking as he glanced between us. "Looks like the party's over," he said, his tone dripping with arrogance. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. The smirk, the casual way they treated my pain, the utter disregard for everything we'd built together. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged at him, my vision going red as the rage took over. But he was faster, stronger. He dodged my attack, grabbing my arm and twisting it behind my back with a painful jerk. I struggled, but he only tightened his grip, his voice low and mocking in my ear. "You're pathetic," he whispered, his breath hot against my skin. No wonder she came to me. Emily watched with a cold, detached expression, like she was bored by the whole scene. Then in a moment that shattered whatever was left of my heart, she laughed, a cruel, sharp sound that echoed through the room. She laughed as her new lover beat me senseless, leaving me in the dirt to die, if not literally, then certainly in every other way that mattered. When he finally let go, I collapsed to the floor, pain shooting through my body. I couldn't even bring myself to look up, to see the triumph in their eyes. The person I had loved, The woman I had married had become a monster, a stranger who took pleasure in my suffering. This wasn't the end.